I am so thrilled today to finally get to talk to Dr. Sanjay Gupta, certainly one of the most charming, if not one of the most professional cardiologists I've come across in my, short experience. Well, it's actually 8 years of visiting cardiologists intensively. So I'm delighted to have you today, Dr. Gupta. And I apologize. We messed up some months ago, but you're such a busy man that we had to wait. But the wait, I am sure, has been worthwhile. So over to you. How are you today?
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And no, I'm keeping well. It's nice and sunny, and we're enjoying some sunshine in England. But yeah, no, thank you so much. It's a privilege to be with you again, and also to talk to many of the people, that I actually met last time when we both.
Yeah, that was I was gonna mention that you came to join our community group, and you really touched them. I'm not just saying that to be nice to you. We talked to a lot of people, many of whom you probably know. I'm not going to mention names right this moment, but you struck a nerve with your story, your approach. I got a lot of love afterwards for having got you on, and I am deeply grateful that you came to see us. And I hope at some point in the future you'll come visit us again. Because we love our heart. I was just listening to one of your podcasts with a colleague of mine. We love our heart is all about trying to, well, as it says it, living with heart concerns, and this means for us not just taking the cocktail of medications that are being prescribed to you, but being able to look beyond that. Um, and so I would just maybe we could start there. I've got a couple of questions, but maybe we could start there as well. And because you had something of I think they call it an aha moment or an epiphany when you started to realize that your classic cardiology was kind of like a tennis ball. It kept the people you were treating kept bouncing back and coming back into your care, which made you think, is this the right thing? I'm sorry, I don't want to steal your story. Carry on.
Yeah, so I'm a mainstream cardiologist. I was trained much like all cardiologists are trained. And in, and I think there's a time when you have to start thinking for yourself, and when you rather than just doing what the book says. And for me, it happened when a close friend had a heart attack out of the blue. And the issue wasn't that he had a heart attack, because I've seen thousands of heart attacks. That doesn't faze me. I know he's my friend, but that's not a big deal. The thing that got me thinking was when mutual friends who knew him, who knew me, came to me and said, "This is terrible what's happened to him. We thought he was healthy. We think we're healthy, but now we're very concerned about what may be going on. You're a cardiologist. Can you find out what's going on? And can you help us stay healthy for a much longer period of time?" And at that point, I foolishly thought I had all the answers. So I sent them all for some tests, CT angiography, which is a way of looking at their heart arteries. I foolishly said, "Okay, that's okay. I can test you out," and you send them all for these tests, and you hope the tests will be normal, and then you'd be able to reassure them, and that'd be it. But actually, everyone's test was abnormal. So
Oh.
they had coronary disease, but the coronary disease was not really causing any symptoms. And so the question then is, if you found something, you have to have a plan. What do you do with this information? Why did I do the test unless I had something I was going to do with the result? Otherwise, all you do is you end up creating more anxiety in a person's mind. And I didn't think this through. I just thought, okay, I know what to do. I'll do the tests and I'll tell them it's okay. What I wasn't prepared for is, what do you do when there's something brewing, but it's not bad enough to cause a problem there and then? How do you prevent people from breaking? Because we're very good at trying to patch people up after they've broken.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, patching someone up after they're broken they're not the same person after that. And therefore, it is far more sensible for us to be working towards trying to stop people from breaking in the first place. But actually, if you start looking at the data, much of the data is derived from studies of people who've broken in the first place. Very little data is available in terms of what you do, in terms of trying to keep a population healthy. And the reason for that is because if you take a bunch of seemingly healthy people and you want to study the effect of an intervention, you have to have a very large number of patients to study, and you have to follow them over a long period of time because at the end of the day, you have to count events. You have to say, okay, let's say I told people to go on a low carb diet and I wanted to compare that with a normal diet. Well, you want to count at the end of a certain number of years how many people are alive, how many people have had heart attacks in one group compared to the other group. But the problem is that because that could take a huge amount of time, the number of events is going to be small, and therefore
Mm.
any difference is going to be really small. So to show a big difference, you have to have a large number of events, but then you have to have a large number of events, you're more likely to get a large number of events in a high risk population rather than a low risk population. What is your obvious high risk population? People who've already broken, people who've already had heart attacks. You'll see more events in those people, and therefore you can do a smaller study with less people compared to these primary prevention studies, which, you know, no one really has the capacity to fund such studies.
Yeah, that's
And
the
that's
next
one of the
question.
big problems.
Obviously, who's going to fund it? Yeah.
And so when you then start looking at the data, you say, okay, well, all the traditional treatments that we recommend have been shown to be reasonably good in people who've already had a problem, but not so impressive in people who've never had a problem before. So in the old days, everyone says, "Oh, take a statin." Well, the data surrounding statins is generally underwhelming, but it is better in people who've had a heart attack compared to people who've never had a heart attack. So you start then realizing that actually there's very little you can do in those people in terms of treat medications, etc. And it all really boils down to lifestyle. And many people do live good lifestyles and still have events. So my understanding became that, okay, well, if there's very little I can do and I just have to wait, and when bad things happen, I just have to do my best for that patient, what is my purpose? How do I help? What contribution am I making? And one of the contributions I thought was, well, you be kind to people, you be human, you help them feel supported, you drive fear out of their mind, you make them understand that there are only two reasons people come to see a doctor. One is discomfort, the other is uncertainty. And you can work with that and you can say, well, look, you can help them become less uncertain by giving them information, by making them feel supported, by being kind and compassionate. The truth is, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. No one prevents that. But I think there is a therapeutic virtue in terms of just being human and and being human and recognizing that a person is lonely and it's a scary ride and there's so much, it's chaotic and there's lots of different opinions. And how does one, as a doctor, just make that person feel seen and heard
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
sit with them and say, okay, even for the course of the time we're spending together, maybe I can just lessen some of your worries. And that, I think, is all that a doctor does, really. And if we don't do that, we're perhaps missing the main part of what we should be doing.
Yeah. Oh, well, that absolutely touches well my heart, but also the story, I mean, I cannot say anything against critical care because it saved my life twice
Yeah, yeah.
on the slab, so to speak. But on both occasions, it was basically like as soon as I was up and running or up and walking again, it was like, well, cheerio, Mr. Felser, take the meds. Oh, and by the way, Mediterranean diet, that's very good, yes. But then it's, it's like goodbye. Off you go into the big wide world. And for me, I don't want to harp on, but I've, had two sudden cardiac arrests, died twice, and the effect that's had on my family and all the rest of it. And this is why we started 5 years ago with We Love Our Heart, because it's not just about trying to get rid of the bag of meds that you're carrying around with you, which I was, determined to do, but to rebuild my life, particularly to rebuild it without anxiety, without the fear that something, I mean, there's no guarantees for anything, of course. Could be tomorrow, could be tonight. But I don't want to live every day thinking, oh my God, when's the next heart attack coming? And, you can imagine, and I'm pretty good these days, but you can imagine you get little twinges or little pains and you think, oh my God, is this the next one? Also because I have to be honest, I have no memory of either heart attack. It was the sudden collapse, and I lost my memory for a couple of days before anyway, so I have no idea what the actual symptoms were that led to, so which kind of is a thing in itself. But what I'm saying is the whole point of what we're doing and why we are so aligned is that we're trying to help people who are concerned about their heart or have had an event to rebuild their lives without the anxiety, with the kindness, like you say, that it doesn't have to be like that. There's another way, and maybe this therapeutic way. I mean, like I say, 5 years ago I had a bag of meds, and a bunch of cardiologists, classic, what I call traditional cardiologists, telling me what to do and heart levels and statins and this, that, and the other. Whereas now it's much more like you say, it's about, I mean, people think I'm a bit nerdy anyway, but it's about, the right kind of water. So energized, structured water. It's hydrogenated water, red light therapy, magnesium, meditation, but in the meaning of like a spiritual approach to the way I lead my life. And not only do I feel happy and healthy as I am, but I feel quite calm about having to face whatever I have to face and help others in the same situation. I'm sorry, it's not about me, but just I
No,
I
absolutely.
just wanted to say that's why I feel so touched and aligned with what you say. That I'm very lucky for some of the healthcare that I've received here, and I know it's a lot better than most people because many doctors, as particularly you'd agree in the NHS, for example, they have literally 10, 15 minutes. Whereas, I do have doctors who are prepared to spend an hour with me and discuss things and talk about things and even debate things. So I'm very grateful and lucky like that. But it's what makes me so grateful to have met someone like yourself who has a very similar view, shall we say.
I think you see the way to look at it is illness is merely a chapter in a person's story. It's not the whole story. And when you go in and you just read that one chapter that interests you, you'll never make sense of the story. And that is why the biggest casualty of modern day medicine is time. And the time to understand a person, the time to understand, what led to this and what the consequences are. And much of medicine concerns itself with the study of illness, but very little time is spent on understanding the impact of illness on identity.
Okay.
A person is nothing without their personhood. And when you have an event like that, it is an assault on your personhood. It changes who you are. And unless we have the grace to sit down with you and try and help you make sense of that chaos, we miss out on doing something really valuable, which is setting you free. Anything can happen. Anything can happen to anyone. I could be talking to you, something bad could happen to me. But being able to get someone who is almost like in a chaotic forest where you don't know whether when it will end, where it will end, whether you will emerge as victor or victim, you don't know anything. The idea that a doctor can just turn up from time to time in that forest and say, hang on, okay, just rest, sit down. I know, long journey, I know it's a struggle, but for the little time, let me just see you. Just feel seen for a little while, and then go and take on that challenge with a renewed vigor. And that is all we do, I think.
Well, I love the analogy because we also in our group, we often talk about the journey, the path, because it's very confusing. I mean, I don't need to tell you. I mean, we have the group that we have has sorted many things out. I have to be honest, we're not completely like clueless, and they're relatively smart compared to. I don't mean smart as the average person, but they certainly thought critically a little bit more about what's being the medical care is being offered. But we talk a lot about it's such a confusing path. It's
Yeah.
such a confusing journey. There are so many rabbit holes you can go down, and the landscape's changing constantly. I mean, when we first started as well, we used to talk about, oh, it's, CAC scores are the important thing. That will be, there's your risk prevention right there. High score means high risk, low score, and zero means no risk. And in the meantime, we've also learned of many people who have zero scores or calcification scores and still have events. So
Mhm.
there's no golden bullet, silver bullet. And at the other hand, we've got somebody who, like you say, has no symptoms, suddenly gets the CAC score of 1,000 and are
Yeah,
freaking out with
I know.
anxiety because they're worried,
I know.
what's going to happen now? What can you do?
This is the big problem. This is the big problem. And that's why I would only encourage people to have tests, provided they know what they're going to do with the results.
Yeah, yeah,
Otherwise, it's just not worth knowing because if you're not going to, if someone says, okay, I smoke 100 cigarettes a day, and if you showed me there was something bad going on in my body, I would be incentivized to stop. I would say, great, let's do it. But if someone says I'm leading a good lifestyle, I'm doing everything I right, I don't want to take any medications, etc., I say, well, just get on with your life. What are you going to do by knowing? The
yeah,
only thing I'm going to do is make you worse mentally. So and those are important discussions, because it is the patient and how they have to deal with this. For us doctors, we can just tell someone, oh, you've got this. How that impacts on their life is so important. And therefore, having a very gentle approach where you tell them, "Look, this is what we know, this is what we don't know. And what we know is so small compared to what we don't know.
yeah.
And
Sorry, go on.
and I'll give you the information, and by having the information, you feel like you have options. And then you tell me what you want to do. What is right for you, the person you are? And
Yeah.
often when we do that, it works out really well, because at the end of the day, when people feel empowered to do something, to make choices, when they choose an option, they're more likely to comply. So there's a difference between, say, me saying, oh, take a statin, for example, and then saying to someone, look, you've got all this plaque in your heart arteries. And I suppose, in that setting, this is something that people recommend, and this is the data behind it. What do you want to do? And those people who choose it then comply because they've chosen it, they own it.
Yeah.
Whereas,
Yeah, I was going to say actually, absolutely, it's the buy into it,
yeah,
and interesting enough on that, it's a completely different subject, but I recently started taking methylene blue. I just it's out there. Has various benefits. I believe it's working for me. But one of the things I noticed was reading about it was that it was often used previously in medicine as a way to see whether patients were complying because if you took, they used to put a couple of drops or whatever of methylene blue into whatever prescription or whatever drug they were supposed to be taking, and then they would check the P, and if the P didn't turn blue, they know they weren't being compliant with the drugs that were being issued. It's just one of those little stories that I thought was quite funny. Because yes, that is a definite effect of it. But anyway, moving on from that, I mean, your approach absolutely I 100% get it, and this idea of kindness and thought for the patient, and for me personally as well, it's all about reducing the anxiety and not increasing the stress. And like you said, we've had many instances, we've even had doctors on who have actually said, if I don't know what I'm testing, I shouldn't do it.
Mhm.
And, there are even certain expressions the doctors use, which means I can't actually explain this, but I'm going to give you a nice medical word so you think I know.
100%, 100%.
So that's quite funny. But I do want let me just ask you a couple of things. I was just um, on a more not medical, but I know you've done a lot of work on ectopic heartbeats, arrhythmia, and blood pressure. Now, maybe we just want to touch on those from a standpoint. I know I have had ectopic heartbeats in the past, and I thought it was fairly common amongst sports people. I was some kind of athlete, or I'm very healthy in that respect. Would you like to say a couple of things about ectopic heartbeats?
So I have spoken to tons and tons of people with ectopic heartbeats. And much of my knowledge about this kind of thing simply comes from talking to people. Okay, I've never had like, a particularly research-minded brain or anything, but I enjoy talking to people. So several years ago, I did a set of videos on ectopic heartbeats. I just wanted to be able to explain them in a language that I understood them by.
Yeah, yeah,
And I was surprised as to how many people came to me and said, "Oh my God, these are horrible. These are miserable. They make me miserable." Tons and tons from all walks of life. So when you start talking to these people, you start saying, okay, what is the common theme here? What is the thing between all these people from different walks of life? How come? What is universal? And by far and away, if you talk to these people, they will all admit to saying, I am a bit of a worrier. I do have a little bit of a slightly anxious personality, or I have, and that isn't to say that isn't a flaw because for so many of them it's a form of PTSD. They've gone through trauma. So
mm,
someone like yourself, for example, with the events that have happened, those are hugely traumatic events. So it wouldn't surprise me when something like that happens. Even going in with a possible heart attack is a very traumatic event. Being there, even if it turns out to be okay, it's not that it's nothing. It's scary, really,
yeah.
really scary. So when you start talking to them, okay, virtually everyone will say that. I then thought to myself, okay, well, I'll go and see if there's any research that has been done to link ectopics and anxiety. Is there? And I came across an interesting study where they took a bunch of people who had both, who complained of ectopics, who also said we have a degree of anxiety about our hearts and our health. And what the researchers did is they strapped them to a heart monitor and they then asked them anxiety-provoking questions. So as these people got more and more anxious trying to answer these questions, they put more ectopics on their monitor, which was really interesting. But the question then was, why? Why do you get more ectopics when you get more anxious? I came across another study where they had a bunch of healthy volunteers and they were studying the effects of hyperventilation on the heart. And they got these guys to hyperventilate. And one of the things they started noticing was these people started getting lots of ectopics on a monitor. So you then say, okay, well, actually, anxiety is the opposite of being relaxed. When we're relaxed, we breathe deep and slow. So when we're more anxious, we breathe shallow and fast. When we're breathing shallow and fast, we're spending more time breathing out, so we're getting rid of lots of carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is an acid, and therefore the pH within our cells starts becoming more alkaline. And the body's immediate response is that we have to keep this pH within a very narrow margin.
Yeah.
And so calcium, magnesium, which is sort of roaming around in the blood, gets recruited into these cells to try and keep this pH normal. And that may well be this lack of magnesium outside the cells is probably the mechanism why people get ectopics. And in my experience, having talked to so many people, things that seem to work is reassurance. Many people will come after I spoke to you, they settled down. Then I saw this, or this happened at work, or I saw this on TV where this athlete, and they've come back. The second thing is give them magnesium, regardless of their magnesium levels. Recommend magnesium, and many of them say 8 out of 10 people say this has taken the edge off. I feel much better. The third thing that has actually been published as a therapy is this idea that if you deliberately slow your breathing down at that time when you're getting the ectopics, and you're breathing once every 10 seconds rather than, twice as much normally, even 3 times as much, then that also gets rid of the ectopics. The reason it's seen more in athletes, etc., is because athletes naturally have a slower heart rate. And because they have a natural slower heart rate because of their fitness, there's a bigger gap for extra beats to come in. So that's why they get them more.
Okay, I'll tell you a funny story, and then we'll go back to the magnesium. And during after my heart attack, they I didn't get a defib or anything like this, but they did insert a digital recorder next
Yeah.
to my heart, which, by the way,
Well,
is still there. But never mind, the battery's dead apparently. But it was quite funny because it was in there, and you're supposed to go in every few months, and they'll just read it off and see what's happened. And then I went into the clinic in the hospital one time, and they said to me, "Oh, Mr. Felser, what were you doing on December the 18th?" I'm like, "Oh, can't remember exactly. It was like end of January or something, around 12:35. Uh, I'm sorry, I don't know. Oh, because your heart stopped for 3 seconds. I'm like, oh,
mm,
would I have noticed? And then it was kind of a worrying thing because the guy in the white coat was a blue coat, but he said, "Oh, I have to talk to the consultant about this." And so he left the room, and I'm literally sat in this room thinking all kinds of things like, what's going to happen now? Are they going to rush me into surgery? I'm going to get a defib. What's going on? And they literally left me there, what probably was 20 minutes. It felt like an hour. And then they came back and said, "No, no, we've looked at your records, Mr. Felsen. Apparently your heart does that occasionally anyway. There's no cause for concern." I'm like, okay, interesting. But it was very funny the way they came in. "What were you doing at 12:35?" I've no idea. But yeah, but that's interesting because we come briefly onto magnesium, which I myself am a big fan of, and it has been explained to me one of the most plausible reasons of why I had a heart attack because it was during a competition actually a duathlon, which is a running and cycling event, on a very hot day, similar to last week, actually, 35 degrees or so. And it was explained to me that it was probably because there was a lack of electrolyte, especially magnesium, that I'd sweated out and had sent my heart into, well, a spasm, basically.
the thing is that yes, I think that certainly electrolyte deficiencies, stress, anything which is very vagal can be triggers. But the point is this, that on that day there were several people doing the same race. They,
Okay. Yeah.
they probably were also uh, in a similar, it would be unlikely that you were like completely out there and everyone else was doing something different. You were probably doing what all the athletes were doing. Everyone's doing it. So the
True.
question you have to ask yourself, and the question we have to ask ourselves, why you?
Yeah.
Why you? You know? And so I am always of the belief that actually one of the really interesting things is that we only know what we know about the heart, and a lot of what we know about the heart is from a visual interpretation.
Mm.
So you do a scan and you say, okay, that's what the heart's meant to look like. And if it looks like that, then it's okay. And if it doesn't look like that, then there's something wrong. But there's more to it than that, isn't there? There's more to disease than it actually visually showing up. A little bit like if you line up five people in a police lineup and you want to know who the murderer is, much of our impression is going to be based around what we think murderers look like. If they look bad and they've got lots of stuff, visually,
Yeah.
that's how we would identify it.
Yeah.
We haven't gone into that person's brain. We don't know what's going on in their brain. Some of the people who look like that may be very gentle, kind people, and someone who looks completely clean cut may be very dangerous. So the point is that we are limited because a lot of our understanding of the heart is purely how it looks. What we really need to do is not only do that, but we have to say, okay, well, what is this? What is the history behind this heart? Has it misbehaved previously? What kind of family does this heart come from? Is there a history of stuff going on in the family? Have we put this heart under stress? A little bit like when you put a criminal under stress and you say, okay, well, maybe This is where, you can provoke him into misbehaving, that kind of thing. So I always wonder whether there is some kind of vulnerability which then gets accentuated by a perfect storm, heat, electrolyte deficiency, stress, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But, and the reason for this is relevant because if there is, you see, you can say, okay, well, don't do exercise or keep really highly stocked up on electrolytes and magnesium, etc., etc. But to my mind, can you be confident that that's it, that that sorts the problem out? How do you know? And that's where I think things like defibrillators, etc., are things which are being used because they provide you with that safeguard, and you say, okay, yes, maybe it doesn't happen, but actually we need some kind of mechanism in place
In
to
case it
act
does.
quickly in case it does.
I mean, that's I don't like I say, it's not about me, but it's interesting that I was never given the opportunity, or offered the opportunity to they would to put a defib in was never a conversation, or even a pacemaker was never a conversation. I mean, don't get me wrong. I feel extremely healthy, and in fact, my last test, I'm kind of almost back to pre-heart attack levels in terms of fitness and what have you. So that's fine. It's been a long, slow journey, shall we say, but and it's most of it has been lifestyle. And as you probably would also vouch for, the two biggest things that I've really worked on is stress reduction and sleep improvement. Those for me have been the major focus of like the last couple of years. Changed diet as well, and obviously don't exercise to the same extreme limits that I used to. But that's where I've come from is more of a suppose I hate to say, but more of a spiritual awakening than. And we even in our group there was I am amongst others who we look at the heart. Also like, is it really a pump? Is it really a center of electrical energy in your body, and how does the blood flow through? And I'm very interested in all of these slightly more esoteric explanations. And I think you mentioned you might have even touched on something similar yourself in previous conversation.
And I think mainstream medicine has to broaden its horizons. It has to think like that. What you cannot do is continue doing the same thing over and over again
Yeah.
and discouraging people to look beyond the box or the protocol and then expecting some kind of wonderful discovery.
Yeah.
This is fundamentally the problem. There are different practitioners operating in different places. So there are nutritionists and there are physiotherapists and all these people are trying to help the patient. But in some ways, instead of us all collaborating for the benefit of that patient, it's a case of my medicine or their medicine, and that's mumbo jumbo, and I'm a proper doctor, and those people are doctors. And I think you do the patient a disservice because one of the most important things we have to say is if these things are still going on, then perhaps there is a lot for us to learn, and we need to be open-minded, and we need to be willing to embrace ideas that may not immediately make sense but may make sense to the patient and may work, So I think the problem now is that we're all so protocol centered.
Mm.
A man comes in, he's had a heart attack. What are you going to do? Okay, you're going to tell him to stop smoking. You're going to give him a statin. You're going to give him some aspirin, and that's it, right? But and if they don't do the statin thing and they have a heart attack, well, that's why he had the heart attack because he didn't listen to what we said. And if he does the statin thing and still has a heart attack, well, what do you expect? People with heart attacks have more heart attacks. Do you know what I mean?
Catch 22.
Catch 22. And what that does is what we should be saying is actually maybe if the person on the statin is still having the heart attack, there's still something that we need to do, which is more than just giving statin. So I really feel that we have to be more humble and we have to have an open mind and we have to work for the patient, not for the protocol.
Yeah. Well. Dr. Gupta Sanjay, we've done our half hour. It's been fascinating, and I'm conscious of your time. I don't want to steal too much, and I know we want to try and keep it fairly tight. And that was a great place to end. I really hope that your message of being kind gets out there to everybody. And I must say, I am sure you have one of the most charming bedside manners of any doctor that I've previously come across. I must compliment you on that. And as I say at the beginning, your modesty and your humble approach is very reassuring, and it really does. It's very touching as well. And as you say, this attitude of kindness is. I mean, you know yourself. They've done tests that the most of the medications are purely panacea at the end of the day. Not, what do I mean? I've got the wrong word, haven't I? When you take a medicine, it doesn't actually work, but you think it's working, so it has the same
Placebo,
effect. Hmm?
placebo, placebo.
Placebo, that's what I mean. Many medicines are placebos effectively.
Absolutely. But you know what does work is that idea of community and connection.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what
Abs
you're doing. That's what
yeah.
you
Yeah, that's part
yeah.
of it. And I agree in that in many respects. And there's also, I'm personally not religious, but I know I can see why religion works because you're part of a community, you're part of a church, you have you meet together, you sing off the same song sheet, literally.
And that's exactly it. That's because it is a hugely traumatic experience to be confronted by the idea that you're mortal,
Yeah.
you know, and therefore suddenly when you're faced with that, meeting others who have also experienced that is hugely enriching, hugely empowering, hugely comforting. Uh, and there's a lot to be said for stuff like that. As a doctor, I always want to feel in the old days, the doctor was a part of the community. It wasn't this kind of
He used to
you're
visit
not
with
in
his
an
little
ivory,
brown bag or hers.
yeah, you're not in an ivory tower. You're a member of the community. You're in town, and people say, "Oh, that's our doctor," and you go and you say hello and you help them with their shopping, etc., etc. It was just a gentler, kinder world,
Yeah.
and that has gone. Now it's all about this. You're sitting there and you're worried for 3 months with these symptoms, and you don't know what's going to happen. And you turn up in this very cold, professional atmosphere, and you get 5 minutes with the doctor, and he's not really interested in knowing your name or what you are or whether you're a dad or whether not interested in any of that. What's the problem? Here's an answer. Here's a pill. See you in
Mm.
6 months. And that is the unmet need, isn't it? That is the unmet need. The unmet need is this kindness and this connection, a human to human interaction, which, and one thing I always go back to is when I read about things like horrible stories like mass shootings where, in America and places like that where someone goes in and starts firing in a school, etc. And you say, how do those families cope with what
Yeah.
happens?
Yeah.
And it's all about communities coming together.
Yeah.
That gives them the strength to go on. On their own, they would completely collapse. And so, we do that. We should be doing that in medicine as well, shouldn't we? The doctor and the patient working together, human to human. And
Yeah, yeah,
so,
and it's incredibly refreshing to hear that from you. So, I think that's a good place to end, and I really want to thank you for your time again, and it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
thank you. Thank you so much.